Tonight on Book Talk, I wanted to introduce you to my friend Carolyn Miller, who is here with us from Australia, and you will love not only learning about her books and all things about her writing and all those good things, but wanted to also introduce her to you as someone who writes amazing contemporary romance. She writes wonderful Regency historicals, and we're going to be writing together in a collection. So all kinds of reasons that I think you will enjoy meeting her. So Carolyn, we'll try that again. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi and hello everybody. Thanks so much for having me, Cara. My name's Carolyn Miller and I live on the east coast of Australia, halfway between Sydney and Canberra, which is our nation's capital. So hello.
Thanks so much for being here tonight. And I want to talk, first of all, because there are all kinds of different things we're going to be able to talk about, but I wanted to start with your current contemporary romance series that is set around hockey, which I find fascinating because Australia is not exactly known as the hockey capital of the world. So how did you decide on hockey as the setting for your current contemporary series?
Well, the heart wants what the heart wants, right? And so the fact that I like I like ice hockey is just one of those weird and random things, but I have liked it for a long time. When was it? Back in 2010, my husband and I took a trip along the east coast of the USA, and we went from Boston up to Prince Edward Island because, hello, I'm an Anne of Green Gables fan. And then we drove across to Quebec City, Montreal, then across to Muskoka, then to Toronto, Niagara Falls, and then flew to Chicago. And, saw all these amazing places, had an awesome time, actually caught a Chicago Blackhawks ice hockey game, which was awesome. And so it was like, just inspired me to want to write some stories. So I had a couple of stories which I wrote based on that trip. And then it was like, I'd like to do something with these books. I wonder what I could do. And then I realized I'd actually been to 4 of the original six NHL teams' cities. And so I thought, well, why not base it on some of the places I've been to and, see if I can connect this. And so I had a couple of stories that I had already written. So I just wrote a few more. And then I discovered that there was actually a Bible study group, which is like an online Bible study for Christian hockey players, professional athletes. And I was like, well, why not use that as my kind of link as to why people actually bother connecting? And so that was super awesome. I think that was a real God thing that I was able to find out about that. So yeah, so it was lots of fun, and it's been great to see people who like hockey who think I'm actually getting the details right.
That's awesome. Because there's one thing I've learned, especially with like sports and things like that, people are passionate about their favorite teams, their favorite sports. We've just gone through that with Purdue and the NCAA basketball tourney. And so, people get really impassioned. And if you don't get it right, they're going to let you know. So how did you go about getting all the action and everything right? Because there's a lot of action in a hockey game.
It's so awesome. That's what makes it so fun. I just think it's got so much to offer. Well, some of it was based on, what I would actually do, which I'm sorry, I had to research, which just meant watching lots of hockey games and listening to the calls and watching and being careful and paying attention and I guess researching. And I was researching even before I knew that that's what I was actually doing. I also had some friends in the US who actually have children who play hockey who were able to help me, fine tune some of those details, and they would run it by their husbands as well. But I was really touched actually just last week to get a message from somebody who is a bit passionate about sports and who really enjoyed my second book in this series called Love on Ice, which is based on the Winter Olympics. And that's why I was trying to get this series out now, because it's like, oh, well, we have the Winter Olympics, so let's capitalize on that. And because of that, I'd researched a lot about hockey and about short track speed skating, which is not, your top sport of the Olympics, but it happens and there's people who are committed to it. And I thought, let's just focus on that. So it's been awesome to see people actually really responding well to my details. So far, no one's got me and said I've got it wrong.
Well, and that's what's really kind of fun about when you have that tie-in, like the Winter Olympics. And there are so many sports in the Winter Olympics that people don't watch except for those every 4 years. And hockey is the one that people do stay kind of tuned in with, but to do things like short track speed skating, like those guys are crazy, or the skeleton, or the bobsled, and all those things that you're just like, I kept looking at my kids as we were watching it going, thank you for being a swimmer. As you know, people are flying down mountains at 80 miles an hour, and I was like, this is crazy. So you've got this series and it's set with hockey, but what was kind of the driver behind it? You had a couple of stories, but what are your heroines doing? What can people expect when they pick up a Carolyn Miller?
What was the driver behind it? Sorry, I missed some of that because it's frozen again. We'll put it down to all the time zones. I think, well, like with any story, I was just passionate about, sharing a little bit about these places that I'd seen. And I think because I sort of bring an Australian outsider's perspective, I think it makes for a nice little taster for other people to kind of go, oh, that's a little bit of what I could see if I went to Boston, or if I was in Detroit, or if I was in Chicago, whatever. But it also allows me to kind of go into a little bit of detail with some of the places that I really enjoyed. So for example, in Chicago, we visited the Art Institute. I love art. So it was great to have this opportunity to actually explore some of those places and sort of bring that perspective. My latest book, which came out last week, is Hearts and Goals, and that's set in Montreal's Botanic Gardens. And we'd stopped there because, I'd visited Prince Edward Island because Anne fan. So I figured my husband, who's a horticulturalist, well, maybe we could go to see a nice botanic gardens. And we went there and I loved it. And so it was like, well, that, these little places, but again, being able to showcase not only that, but the God factor as well, and how God can bring us all on a journey. And that's kind of fun to see how these different people progress with their spirituality through the course of the different books as well. So yes, hopefully people enjoy that.
That's great. And I love that you're pulling in some of the features that you loved as you were visiting. And that sounds like an amazing trip. Anne of Green Gables is one of my favorite books and characters of all time. And I still haven't gotten to Prince Edward Island. So one of these days. So when you're thinking about like hockey in Australia, it's not ice hockey. What do you do in Australia instead?
Well, because we tend to do more sunshine than snow, we have a lot of field hockey. And so Australia's been really, really good at field hockey over the years and won world championships, gold medals, et cetera, et cetera. We do have a very small ice hockey league. And so I have seen a couple of games here in Australia as well. It's not quite the same.
Yeah, I've only been to a couple of professional hockey games, and they are intense. There is so much going on and all the action and movement. And I'm always in awe of figure skaters and hockey players and how they can do everything they're doing while on those incredibly thin blades as they're, flying all over the ice hocky rink. It's just crazy.
Absolutely.
So have you ever...
It's incredible skill and strength as well.
Yeah, no, it is. It's an incredible skill. So have you ever been on ice skates?
Oh, a couple of times. It wasn't pretty. Let's just leave it at that.
So Nina was wondering, she says that one of her nieces is currently obsessed with all things Anne, which that tells me she's on the right track. But who is your favorite character in Anne of Green Gables? So like I was always Diana. My friend was Anne and I was Diana. Did you have a favorite character?
I think it's inevitable, isn't it, Cara? I mean,
yeah.
And I'm imaginative, but I also like Gilbert. He's always, a big fan. What was really fun, because I'm such a hardcore fan, is that we visited Muskoka, which is 2 hours north of Toronto, which is where the Blue Castle is set. So for Anne fans who have read L.M. Montgomery's The Blue Castle. She actually visited that section. And so I said to my husband, we have to go here too. So it's really fun. For my 6th book in this series, I've got an Anne fan, and that's where she goes. And so, we have a number of little references there. So I really enjoyed writing that one too.
Oh, that is so much fun. So very fun. So you've written these contemporary novels, but you also have all these wonderful historical regencies that you write as well. And those feel very different when I think about writing them as a reader who really has loved your Regency. So how do you, I guess, find that space or the separation between the two? And what might be similar about your historical and your contemporaries? Do they have like a similar theme, or are they just completely different books?
I think all of my books have, a fairly strong God focus. It's been called an unapologetic Christian message. And so I like the fact that you can read one of my contemporaries, or you can read one of my historicals, and, you'll get some solid God stuff in it. But yeah, it does take a bit of a change, a bit of a shift in focus, and even like what I feed myself. So if I'm, having to do the historicals, I can't be reading a rom-com. I just need the language, and I need, that kind of thing just to be able to go through it. And then for me, I find it's really helpful just to write whatever else is going to be in that series. So it's all kind of there. And I'm not sort of having to change too much. But having said that, it is a fun mental cleanser to be able to shift from one genre to another. So I'm enjoying that as well.
That's fun. And Nina wanted to know, what got you into writing Regency?
I am a Georgette Heyer fan and a Jane Austen fan. And so my first 4, 5 books were contemporaries. So I was like, I'm really enjoying writing these. And in fact, actually, the whole reason I started writing was because of a Winter Olympics thing where I saw an Australian girl holding hands with an American boy. And it's just like, oh, what's their story? And so that's what actually started my whole story thing, which is why it was, fun to see Love on Ice finally released. But after writing a few contemporaries, it was like, oh, I wonder what I could do. I'd written a romantic suspense. I'd written a couple of other sorts of things. I wonder if I could have a go at writing a Pride and Prejudice type story, but include a little bit more of a faith thread through it. So I did, and that became The Elusive Miss Ellison. So there you go. It was fun.
Well, and I guess I have that one in another stack because I'm looking at all these going, which one's that? But what I think is fun is I never thought I would be a Regency reader. Just never thought that would be my time period. And then I discovered Julie Clausen, and now that's just exploded. And there are so many authors who write in this space. You, Sarah Ladd. I mean, I could go on and on. There's a bunch of authors in the non-Christian area that I will read as well, because they write really good mysteries set in that time period. And it's become much more engaging to me, but I would still never write it. So what's the most interesting research that you've had to do for one of these historical novels?
Oh, wow. Gosh, so many things. Okay, so for my second book, which is called The Captivating Lady Charlotte, I had a guy who, well, he's a duke. I only ever wrote one duke because I figured, how many Christian single dukes are there? Really? Available? Like, I mean, hello. Anyway, he is a bit of a scientist. So I had some fun exploring some of the things he might be interested in. So things even like tarmac, which actually is called macadam, and it's actually from a guy whose last name was that sort of thing. So I was researching that, had some fun researching poisons and all sorts of things. For this new series, it's called the Regency Wallflowers. I've been exploring some of what happened, what life would have been like for soldiers returning after the Napoleonic Wars who had a sickness called Walkeren disease. And so basically they had fevers, doctors couldn't identify what they were, and we're talking Regency era medicine, so it's 200 years ago, they just didn't know lots of things. But it was this insidious disease which killed more people than the fighting did when they were in places like the Netherlands and stuff like that. So part of that research was looking at old diaries and things like that as well, which I found really fascinating, just to see there were people who were in command who were traveling from England to the Netherlands with their pet tortoises and not, caring so much about people. I know, right? It's just like, what is that about?
Yeah, I never thought about having a pet tortoise. Or yeah, and I love how you're like, I really enjoyed learning more about poison, and that nice voice with a smile as you're like, of course that's what I did. And I think sometimes people don't realize all the crazy things that we research to make our books feel real and be embedded in truth, even as they're fiction. So when you're going back and forth between these, like, I know when I'm writing World War II and then I'm switching to contemporary, I will change the music I'm listening to. And so that's like the clue that my brain gets, that, oh, we have now switched into 1940s because Glenn Miller, Chattanooga Choo Choo or whatever is playing, or I'll switch to something, more contemporary. So do you do anything like that, or is it just really focused more on what you're reading and what you're researching?
Probably reading, researching, but also maybe what I'm watching as well. So unfortunately, I watched the new Bridgerton season 2, and I enjoyed it a lot more than season 1 because it wasn't quite the sex romp that season 1 was. But then after that, I had to watch, because my daughter insisted, Northanger Abbey, and then we had to watch Austenland. So I really feel like I'm trying to write a contemporary rom-com, but I've got all these images and all these clothing things and language and all that sort of stuff from watching all this stuff on the weekend. So it's like, oh, see, it really does. It's amazing, isn't it, how that stuff can kind of permeate. I don't tend to write listening to music because that just, affects me too much. It just distracts me too much. Although I do have playlists for each of my new contemporary books, and that's something that's fun that I can't necessarily do with my historicals.
That would be a little harder to do with a historical, lots of Bach or things like that. So that's fun. So you and I are actually going to be writing together in a novella collection, which is going to be so much fun. So what's going on with this? I mean, I'm going to let you explain it because you invited me to be part of it, which was so much fun. And I'll be writing World War II, but you're writing the first story. So this is kind of a generational story.
That's right. And it's so exciting for me as an Australian because I'm actually going to be setting my story in Australia. So it's not Regency, it's actually in the 1850s, but it's the Australian gold rush era. And I know lots of people might be familiar, say, with California gold rushes, which actually were just a couple of years or so ahead of the Australian one. So for me to actually set something in my home state even is really, really cool. So I think with this story, we have a gold cross, and you might be able to guess where the gold is from, hint, hint, which makes its way across the shores from Australia to America and beyond. And it becomes this like keepsake sort of thing. So it's a novella collection coming out in April next year. So I'm excited to be working with Cara and Angela and Kelly as well as part of this novella collection. It'll be good.
And I am so excited because it's been a while since I've been able to write World War II based novels. And so to be able to do that in this collection, it's going to be so much fun. But what I often end up doing is I will dive into like my classic black and white movies. Like I'm like, okay, I need to get the vernacular and stuff back in my head.
Yes.
And it's time to watch some Gables and Cary Grant. It's such a hardship. I mean, just really a hardship to force myself to watch those.
Feeling for you.
Yeah. It's amazing. I'll sit there and I'll actually take notes on like what are the phrases and the vernacular that they're saying, like cat's pajamas and all this, that we're like, nobody talks like that today. But it really does help kind of sprinkle in the flavor of the moment and so time period.
Yeah, no, I find that even like with the hockey sorts of things, it's like I have to watch a game. Oh, excuse me while I just write down what the commentators say or what they do, because, it just grounds it that little bit more. It's going to be tricky to find some 1850s TV. No, I already have a plan. It's okay. I know what I'm going to be doing with that. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
Well, you'll probably use newspapers and diaries and things like that to get into the feel of it. So.
Yes. God bless my mum. She dropped off some research material for me because she's a bit more of a historian than I am. So that was great. So thanks, Mum.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I need a little research fairy to help me on things like that.
Oh dear.
So, when you think about what you love writing most, do you wish you could do just one thing, or do you enjoy the mix of doing some historical and some contemporary?
I love the mix. I think it's necessary to do the mix. So I had 9 Regencies published within 3 years. So I think, I don't know if it burned me out, but I think I wrote a lot. And so a lot of people might just have one book or a couple of books a year. So I feel like I've given it a good stint.
Yeah,
and I've got this new series as well. So, you know, there's a few. So it's kind of really been refreshing for my creativity to go back to something that I used to do and be able to incorporate that. But I'm hoping to keep it a little bit balanced as well as we go forward and just see. So I've still got another Regency coming out this year. There'll be another one next year, as well as the Australian historical novella as well. So yeah, so that will be fun just to see how that goes.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I think sometimes it can be really fun when we mix it up. Like last summer when I wrote a romantic comedy novella, and I don't normally do that, where my other novella last summer had the heroine's point of view in first person, which normally I can't do that. And so it's just fun to sometimes be able to play and do something a little different. And I think you're right. It does help keep the creativity kind of fresh, because if you get kind of stuck or you've been really kind of focused in one area, it can be very refreshing and kind of break things up to be able to pivot a little bit and play. So when you get writer's block, what do you do?
I don't know that I tend to get too much writer's block because I just have lots of stories just spinning around in my head, and I've got the time to kind of focus on those things. I will walk the dog. That will be one of the things I try to do. So yeah, you know, that's good. I need apparently to get out into the fresh air sometimes. So yeah,
well, and I think that's, you know, one of those keys is just to be willing to say, okay, maybe I just need to change and do something else for a few minutes and let the subconscious work or whatever. So where can people find your books if they are now really